took the medicine.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome. Come on in.
I got thinking about that one.
Today we're going to be on lesson number 3 of the life of Jacob. You can find those Bible studies right in front of you. And so grab one and have a seat. Very exciting to look. We're going to see Jacob versus Laban, or Laban versus Jacob, and see a little bit more of that. Come on in. Welcome. Friday we had a great night. We went and saw the Mud Hens up at Toledo. Everybody been to a Mud Hen game? Very excited to go to a Mud Hen game. If you go to Mud Hens, I recommend eating somewhere before you go in. Very expensive to be inside, so the wife and family and I, we went to one of those little places, one of those little dives right outside. Kind of interesting, before we went in, there was this place that had this sign that said, alright, so we went in, and right inside they had this deal where the bartender would take a lemon and cut it in half. And he was one of these big bodybuilder types, and he would squeeze the lemon and into a jar or into a glass. And he said if you could squeeze any more liquid out of that lemon, you could get $1,000. I tried really hard. I couldn't get any more drops out of that thing, and he squeezed every bit of it out. We had our entire meal, saw lots of people try, couldn't get anything out. Wouldn't you believe it? The skinniest man I'd ever saw, about 4 foot, came in, about 100 pounds, soaking wet, came in, walked up to this counter, said, I'll try. He grabbed this lemon, squeezed 6 drops out. Could not believe it. The guy looked at me and said, what do you do? Are you a construction worker for a living? What do? You lift weights? He goes, no, I work for the IRS. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about Jacob and Laban. He's building an investment, and that's what we're going to talk about, is Jacob's investment in his future. Andrew and I are also working on our investment. We have decided we're retiring to Florida. We're going to build our retirement and our investing right outside SeaWorld, a little campsite, all intents and purposes. Let's get started. Get it? All right, let's get started. So take a look right there at the top. It says, strengthened by his experiences at Bethel. That is where he had his dream, right? Jacob pressed towards his mother's homeland in search of a wife. At Bethel, or at the well, Jacob showed signs of a changed life. Instead of taking advantage of a shepherds he met, he oversaw the watering of flocks of sheep. Unlike the unfaithful kiss he gave to his father, Jacob wept as he introduced himself and kissed Rachel. After meeting his uncle, Laban, Jacob revealed his life story. He even worked a month without pay for his uncle. Jacob, the former deceiver, was a reformed man. By turning from lies and deception, Jacob was finally in a position in which God could mold him into the man who was worthy of his covenant. Laban has but one question for him. Name your salary. Jacob's response, Rachel. However, Jacob may have met his match in deception. Now, I want to show you some things because this will give us a little bit of idea of where we're at today, okay? So here is about where we start our story. Right about here is where Bethel is. And if you look, right, you kind of in this general area, he's walked up to Haran. Does everybody see that blue line up there? That's right on the Euphrates River. He's walked up to Haran. And you can see some other places that are kind of important. You see Nineveh up there. You see Babylon down here. There's Haran. There's where we're at now. For all of this story taking place, or this history taking place. So kind of a general idea of where all these things are going to take place. Here's Sinai and Egypt. So kind of get this idea in place. Other things that you need to take into account. So here is the family of Abraham. Here is Sarah. And remember that Sarah tells Jacob to go to her family to find a wife. Okay, so now we're going to move over here. And you're going to see Laban right here. This is from her family. And there is Rebecca, right? And so there's kind of the idea that you wanna get in your idea. Here is Rebecca, Laban, Jacob. So kind of get your idea of a family tree in your mind. Now we're going to turn in our Bibles. So grab a Bible. It is going to be helpful to open up your Bibles because they're not always going to be available for you today. I'm not always going to flip back. So turn to Genesis chapter 29. Genesis chapter 29, verses 16 through 30. And as we get there, would somebody be willing to read verses 16 through 30?
Laban had two daughters. The name of the older one was Leah, and the name of the younger one was Rachel. Leah had attractive eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful face and figure. Jacob loved Rachel. He said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Laban said, it is better for me to give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. They seemed to him like a few days because of the love he had for her. How far? 30? Okay. Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time of service is finished, so that I may go to her. Laban gathered together all the local people and made a feast. When evening had arrived, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob. And Jacob went to her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter, Leah, as her maid. When morning came, Jacob realized it was Leah, so Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Didn't I serve you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me? Laban said, that is not the way we do it here. We do not give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill the marriage week for this one, and we will give you the other one too, for 7 more years of service. So that is what Jacob did. When he fulfilled the marriage week, Laban gave him Rachel, his daughter, for his wife. Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her maid. Jacob also went to Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. He served Laban 7 more years.
All right. So question number 1, it says, what is the hidden agenda behind Laban's question? Tell me what your wages should be. There's something hidden here. What should your wages be? Now, there's something we need to understand about these marriages. We know about the dowry, right? What's a dowry?
Price paid to the bride's family.
What's that?
Price paid to the bride's family.
Price paid to the family. When Jacob left his dad, what did he leave his dad with? What did he leave his dad with in his purse? Nothing. So when he comes in, he says, I want to marry Rachel. And he says, I'll work for her hand. If he says, I'll work for a year, how much did he just offer for Rachel?
A year's worth of work.
Is that very much? kind of relative. Okay. So as a dad, if somebody comes and says, "Oh, I'll work a little bit for your daughter," how are you going to receive that?
How much you value her?
Ah, he's kind of got him at a "how much do you value my daughter" question, right? So he's kind of got him at a little bit of a catch-22. The question is, how much are you going to value my daughter? That's really what he's asking here, isn't it? Because Jacob started off with, "I want to marry your daughter." He sees this, he knows this. So how much do you want to marry my daughter is really what the question is, right? So look at this. Laban showed himself not only to be greedy, but willing to take advantage of another person. He had noticed Jacob's heart was drawn to a beautiful cousin that he had met, and he truly asked, "Could I perhaps use Jacob's love for her to my advantage?" Right? Laban knew that Jacob couldn't afford to set the terms for his employment too low. That could be interpreted as either "I can't afford anymore," or "she isn't worth more to me." Jacob could also want to be sure his offer would be one that Laban couldn't refuse. By accepting the bride price offered, Laban got the benefit for the next 7 years of Jacob's skill, right? So by offering 7 years of service, Laban's going to say yes, and that makes it a lot. So this is kind of a good way of saying it's a lot for your daughter, but this was Laban's way of deceiving or saying, "How much do you value my daughter?" Because girls, women, how much do you want to be valued by your husband? A little or a lot? A lot. So this is also something that Rachel wants to hear, isn't it? Because she would have been privy to this conversation. So how much do you value me, future husband?
There's no good answer to that.
There's no good answer to that, right? All right. Now this is interesting too. This is kind of an interesting thing. Look carefully at this question. Why does Jacob prefer Rachel to Leah?
Looks. How she looks.
Looks. All right, so that's kind of interesting. In this, look carefully at this text, because look what it says. It says Leah had attractive eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful face and figure. Now, we're going to examine this a little bit because it doesn't do it justice. Okay, every time I break out the Hebrew, it starts to give you a little bit of chest pains. All right. Okay, look at this. Here's the Hebrew. Here's the Hebrew, and it all comes down to this word. All right, and I'm gonna throw a little bit of a tissy fit over this word because look, here's from the Hebrew word reach, and it means, now here it is. Are you ready? To be tender, weak, or soft. To be tender, weak, or soft. Now, how do we translate this in this translation?
Attractive eyes.
Attractive eyes. Now, to our English-speaking brains, what does that mean that Jacob was really looking at? Appearance. So let's look at how some other translations do it. NIV. Leah had weak eyes. New Living Translation. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes. New English Standard Version. Leah's eyes were weak. Marine Standard Version, which no one has ever heard of. Leah had weak eyes. And the King James Bible. Leah was tender-eyed. What did those translations give you a vision of?
She's weak.
She was blind.
She was blind. What else? Anybody else got any other?
Maybe that Leah didn't appear as healthy or as strong as Rachel.
That could have very well been it. Look at this. So here it is. Probably she suffered, as so many do in the Sandy region. So this was a common problem, and it was also something that people veered away from. Look at this. She suffered from some form of, whatever that word is, it's an eye disorder. Rachel was, on the contrary, beautiful and well-favored. Leah's weary eyes could have been regarded in the East as a great defect. So there was something physically wrong with her. Sand in the eyes would have caused her to be a problem. Just as bright eyes were very much admired, yet Rachel was not. Rachel, with her fair face, well-proportioned figure, and her husband's last name, love, that was the mother of the progenitor of the Messiah, but the weary-eyed Leah. So there was something physically wrong with her eyes that would have drawn him away from her. She would have been seen as weak because of that. It wouldn't have been just that she was unattractive, but there was something that would have made her not able to do the job necessarily of a shepherdess. Does that make sense now? So farmers, there may have been something that would have made her unable to do the work of a farmhand. She may not have been able to help out in the farming. Does that help?
Well, no one else wanted to marry her in that 7-year period while he's waiting for Rachel.
Yeah, exactly. And so likely that's something, and oftentimes we can find other secular things, meaning things outside the Bible, where it says that these kinds of eye problems were seen as very unwanted in the area of marriage. And so that's probably what it's a reference to. She was probably going blind or near blind or had great eye defects. It's not an attractive kind of like face kind of thing. All right, for what purpose is Laban deceiving Jacob? Why is he deceiving? What does he actually want?
Free labor.
Free labor.
You got it.
That's right. Right? So he wants free labor. Who in here doesn't like free labor? We've all worked our kids more than we should, right? Why do I have to do all the chores? Because I had children, right? All right. So Laban was a greedy man that he was. He wanted another 7 years of free labor from this new son-in-law. So he devised a mean way of getting it. Jacob, now I think this is interesting, the heel grabber, remember the one that was so guilty of deceiving, the one who usually managed to get ahead of the other person by fair means or foul, met his match in Laban, right? So he wants the free labor. And so this is the perfect way. You still love Leah. Now you can still have, or you want Rachel, you can still have her, but you have to find this extra 7 years. And so are you going to get it? What clues in the text tell you that Leah might not be innocent? Maybe Leah's in on the plot. Is there anything there?
Well, she's the one that ended up being married to Jacob.
Leah gets married to Jacob. Do you think that this whole thing would have been like, surprise, today's your wedding day? Maybe. Anything else? There's actually something else there. So if you look at this section, 22 and 23, Laban gathered together all the local people and he made a feast. Okay. When evening had arrived, he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob to her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter, and Leah as her maid.
She realized her circumstances, that she wasn't going to get married because of her defect, and she went along with it. Besides, apparently Jacob was a good-looking man, so she jumped at the chance.
Yeah.
To get with him.
Yeah, and there's something here. If you look down later on, do you see this fact that he gives her a maid? Mm-hmm. That is common, and they would have done this in advance. This would have been something that would have been handed out to the daughters in advance. This would have been foreknowledge for Leah. She would have known this was coming because it would have been passed on as part of a blessing. Leah's part in the plot requires explanation. She cannot be absolved from guilt, even on the score that it behooved her, according to the conventions of those days, to submit to parental authority. She knew that Jacob was to be deceived. A moral issue was involved. So in other words, he bought her off. And like you said, the fact that she knew that there was some kind of defect going on, it likely was that she was saying, all right, this works out well for me. Also, had she called it out ahead of time, had she said, this is wrong, it would have worked out very poorly for her, right? Likely, what would have happened from her parents' side?
She wouldn't have gotten married, and she would have been a spinster.
Yeah, and her father would have been very upset, right? And so likely she would have been segregated from the family, and if not, gotten rid of.
Esther,
Right. Yeah.
I think also it's kind of obvious that she played along with it in that, you know, he went to whom he thought was Rachel to consummate the marriage, and then in the morning he realized it was Leah. She had an entire night to say something, to protest, to do anything, and she did nothing.
She doesn't. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so those are all kind of interesting. Question number, or then it says, in exchange for her part in the hoax, Leah received a personal servant. Leah could have easily, we revealed the plot, but that would have embarrassed her father before his guests, a cultural taboo. Moreover, such action could have had other consequences. Jacob would have been banished out without Rachel, leaving Leah to live a disappointed sister and an angry father. Okay, let's respond to this. It's in the middle of your text there. It says, this is Martin Luther. I wouldn't have put up with this. I had taken Laban to court and demanded that he be ordered to give me the bride for whom I had served him under contract. That's Martin Luther, who, by the way, was not always subtle in all that he did. How would you respond to Martin Luther in this point? What does it say about Jacob? And what does it say? What do you think?
What law was there at that time that, I mean, was there even a court system or anything, or would it have just literally fallen on one man's word against another?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's attacking that man's word. That kind of maybe great, probably.
And also, what does it say about Jacob? Consider what Jacob has done in the past. What do we notice about Jacob? How he has changed.
He's submitting
To who?
God.
To God. Obviously, he's seeing something different, isn't he? When before God says you need to wait. Remember what he did under his father? What did he do under his father when his father said, or when God said, you're going to get the blessing, but you need to wait?
Became impatient.
He became impatient. And he said, I'm going to hurry this along. I'm going to hurry it along. And now what's he doing?
He's waiting, he's being patient.
He's being patient. And remember, we started this out. This is kind of the Lord's way of saying, here, I'm going to put you in kind of a training camp, aren't I? I'm going to train you along. I'm going to bring you along. And now we have it. He's kind of learning his lesson finally, isn't he? All right, let's go down to that next paragraph. It says, Laban never explained why he intentionally misled Jacob. His only response was an appeal to local custom. That you have to do the oldest daughter, then the youngest. Before the ceremony, Laban could have pulled Jacob aside and broken the news. But he didn't. Jacob had repeatedly demonstrated his disregard for family customs. Earlier in his life, by taking advantage of his brother, he usurped the birthright tradition. And by taking advantage of his father's frailties, he had stolen the traditional blessing. Unfazed by family customs, Jacob was now forced to respect family practices. From this ordeal, Jacob matured, learning the value of submission to those in authority over him, and to God's plan for his life. Why do you think Jacob didn't abandon the work, return home, or complain more to the Lord about the situation at hand? Why do you think he just didn't abandon it all?
He's getting older, he's starting to learn and understand.
There you go. He's getting older. He's maturing in the faith, right? He's starting to figure things out. So he declined to humiliate Leah by demanding that the marriage be annulled. And from this ordeal, Jacob matured, learning the value of submission to those in authority over him and in God's plan for his life. Now, flip it over. We're going to end on this. Question for you real quick. Have you ever wondered how polygamy plays into this whole story? How many wives is Jacob going to end up with? 2. And here's another interesting thing. If you think about it this way, if you look at that top paragraph, all of the tribes of Israel come out of Jacob here. Because he gets 2 wives and 2 concubines out of this. So husbands, how would you like to have 2 wives and 2 concubines?
Good luck.
Yeah, no. But how does God allow this? And is it biblical? I mean, is this something that God is pleased with? God allows this, right? So why don't we talk about that? Let's talk about that. Maybe.
When people look at the Bible and they see cases of polygamy, they're not distinguishing between what God commands from the history of how he treated his people and how his people treated him. And his people were not faithful. God is the one who designs marriage. God is the one who invents marriage. Marriage is not something invented by humans. God is the one who gives the first woman to the first man. God is the one who presides over that marriage ceremony. And then when Moses tells us this, he makes a comment. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife in the singular, and the 2 shall be one flesh. So that's God's standard. That's what the Bible is teaching. We should distinguish that from the Bible as a divine history of God's relationships with his people. These relationships are called covenants. A covenant is like a marriage where two parties make a commitment to be devoted to each other, to be loyal, to be faithful. We see that God creates that kind of a relationship with Adam and Eve, but they are disloyal. They do not believe his word. They do not obey him, and they plunge humanity into chaos and evil. God makes a new start with Noah, and then that also goes down the tubes. God makes a new start with Abraham and his family. Then God makes a covenant with Israel, the family of Abraham. And the whole history of the Old Testament is a history of how human partners are unfaithful, human partners are disloyal. They do not believe in the word of God. They do not believe what God says. They do not obey his royal rule and kingship. And they rebel, and they want to establish what is right and wrong for themselves. And so in that history, we see a constant violation of the original standard. And so that's what we're seeing. We see that with Abraham, God promises him a child. He doesn't trust God. He doesn't wait for God. He tries to do it on his own strength, and he has a relationship with Sarah's female servant. Jacob also has 2 wives. Is that a wonderful relationship? No, it's not a wonderful relationship. The Bible is showing that this brings in all kinds of trouble. In the book of Judges, it tells us that these judges had many wives. Why? Because they were aspiring to be king. So most people in the ancient Near East only had 1 wife. Only kings could afford to have many wives. So when you read the Bible is not promoting polygamy. It's showing us that only royal figures had many wives. And it's also showing us that this is not ideal, that this caused all kinds of difficulty and hardship and trouble and the fighting among the wives and it's not a satisfactory relationship. We see that in the case of David. Nathan the prophet came to him and spoke to him and gave a parable about a guy who had many sheep and a poor man who had only one sheep. And when someone came and he had to show hospitality, instead of slaughtering one of his many sheep, he stole the one sheep that this poor man had. And all that is saying is, you have many wives, and still you're not satisfied. So it shows that having many wives is not a satisfactory relationship. You have many wives, and you're not satisfied, and you have to go and steal the one woman that this one person has. We see that in the case of Solomon. Solomon is a tragic figure because he did not practice what he preached. So you have the wisdom of Solomon in what he wrote, but we don't see the wisdom of Solomon in the way he lived. He disregarded his own wise principles. He multiplied wives, which is expressly forbidden for kings in Deuteronomy 17. The king is not to multiply wives, not to multiply gold, not to multiply horses, because who is a king going to marry? He's going to marry a princess from another country, and it's going to create a political alliance, and they're going to trust in that alliance, and they're not going to trust in the Lord. He's not to multiply horses because he's not to rely on chariots and military hardware. He's not to multiply gold because he's not to trust in his ability to pay other kings to deliver him. He's to put his trust in Yahweh. So what? The history of the Bible shows, even though these were men of faith, they're not men of morality. Not everything they did was moral. If you look at the New Testament and look at what Jesus says in the New Testament and look at what the apostles say, they never hold up anyone from the Old Testament as a moral example. They hold them up as examples of faith, but not as examples of morality. So there's a very clear difference between what God commands and instructs us to do in marriage and how his people actually behaved in the history that's recorded for us. Just because these things happened in the Old Testament, we have to listen to what the narrator is saying. The narrator is not saying this is a good thing. He's showing that it's a bad thing. It creates all kinds of problems, and it doesn't create a satisfactory way to live because it's abandoning the creation standard.
And with that, we'll end. Let's hold our hands. Dear Heavenly Father, as we continue studying Jacob, we ask that you would bless our study of your word. Help us learn from these patriarchs and see that while they are flawed men, they are men of faith. Help our faith always look to you, the author and perfecter of our faith. Amen. We'll see you upstairs.